Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and we're going to be discussing hidden calories. So we've talked a lot about nutrition. About 1 out of every 4 podcasts is nutrition, and we've kind of talked about before the components that make up an effective diet, whether that's for weight loss, weight gain, performance, whatever, even like blood sugar control. So for health effects, is the components that are involved in making a correct diet. They're the same for every diet. So we've talked about it in podcast number 41, titled "Diet Right: What Matters Most." That the most important thing when it comes to diets is calories. Calories kind of give you the direction in which the diet is going. So if you're eating under your maintenance level of calories, you'll lose body fat. So if the calories are low, your body fat will go low. If you eat above your maintenance calories, your calories are above, therefore your weight will go up. So if the calories are up, the body weight will go up. If you eat around your maintenance calories, but you eat with the other components all in place, and you train regularly, and you kind of do healthy behaviors, your body weight would stay the same because your calories are the same, but over time you would improve your body composition. So the amount of muscle you have compared to fat. And that's also good for performance and other reasons where we want to become healthier and or become better at a skill set or performance or something about the body. We want to get better, but we don't really want to be heavier or lighter. We just want to kind of stay where we're at. So calories kind of give you the direction. Now, are there too low of calories? Yes, we've talked about that before. And is there too high of calories to where you're gaining muscle you might want, but you're gaining a whole bunch of fat with that muscle that's unnecessary? And yes, we've talked about that as well. So there is a too low and there is a too high. But calories is the most important thing. So you can be eating all very clean, healthy foods, quote unquote, but if you're eating an amount that makes your calories above maintenance level, but your goal and the reason why you were eating all the healthy food was because you wanted to lose weight, well, if your calories are above maintenance level, you will actually gain weight. So no matter how healthy you eat of everything else, no matter how much you check off the list of all the other healthy dieting things there are, behaviors and whatnot, if you're not controlling your calories, you don't control the direction in which your diet is going. So you're putting in a lot of effort into those other things, but they don't really matter because the calories have to be in place first. So calories are the number one thing that we would look for. Number 2 is protein intake, making sure the person has enough protein, and that's going to be a lot of reasons. And in podcast number 33, we've talked about that, about how much protein do I need, and we give all the reasons why protein is so important. Then the next component is kind of meal timing. Are we eating the food when we need it? Are we eating the food when correct timing compared to our activity levels and all that stuff? And then the 4th component is macronutrient quality. So are we eating the kind of the best types of proteins, best types of carbs, best types of fats? And then everything else kind of falls in number 5. So that would be like supplements and God knows whatever else people do. But the major components is calories, protein intake, and meal timing. Macronutrient quality is important, but if it's 4th down the list, the reason why I tend not to overemphasize that much is because most people never control their calories correctly. And then people who do control their calories correctly, their next step is getting protein. And actually, people more often will get that correct before they even worry about their calories, which is the wrong order. And then meal timing is a whole nother layer of things, is can I eat my food correctly, depending on my activity level. So typically, for people have a hard time getting the first 3 right. So macronutrient quality really is kind of like an afterthought because you have to get everything else right before that matters. So you have to get everything else right before having a sweet potato versus a white potato actually makes any difference whatsoever. So too often that's where people start the diet because it's easier than trying to figure out their calories, their protein, their meal timing. They just want to say, I want to keep doing everything I'm normally doing habit-wise, but now instead of white potatoes, I'm going to eat sweet potatoes. That doesn't mean shit. It doesn't, what is that? Ugh. That's a ridiculously lazy way to do this. because we're telling you it's the fourth most effective thing. So if I told you that you could make more money, there was the number one most effective way to make more money. There was the second most effective way to make money. There was the third most effective way to make money, and then there's the fourth. Would you really pick the fourth? If I told you you could make more money, you're going to pick the fourth most effective way to do that? If I told you you could have better relationships with your family, are you going to pick the fourth most effective way to do that? No. So it doesn't make any sense in other areas of life, so why the hell do we do that with our nutrition? So, little rant there. But that's the idea. Like, if we need to actually think of it that way, because that is, in a sense, what people are doing. If they start with just paying attention to, like, wheat bread versus white bread, or whether something's organic or not, oh my gosh, like, you're looking so far down the list of effectiveness and need that it's borderline useless. So, again, that would be like as if you're picking the fourth most effective way to make money, or the fourth most effective way to have good relationships. It would just be a dumb choice, wouldn't it? To leave the first, second, and third options on the table, but picking the fourth. We know that's dumb. Now, in this case, the number one way to make money or better relationships, the number two, the number three way, those feel like they're kind of more complex. They feel like they're harder to understand, or they take more work. So we would rather just start at number four. That's why people pick it, because they feel like it's easy, not because it's the most effective. And that's an unfortunate choice. You're doing yourself a disservice. Because if you're going to put in 1 ounce of effort, why not put it towards the thing that means the most? Okay? So, we know that from podcast 41 that those are the components of a successful diet. And again, that's a diet where we're trying to gain weight, lose weight, increase performance, get stronger, whatever it might be. Okay? So, number 41 is what we want to know to understand those components. And then in the individual components, so how, like, now that we know kind of that those are the components we need to pay attention to, podcast 153 talks about nutrition, titled How Many Calories Do I Need? And basically what we're trying to do with that podcast, and the idea of kind of balancing your calories, or at least being aware of them, is to have consistency to your calorie intake. So that way you can then modify from a known constant. So if we know we have to have like a lower than maintenance level calories for us to lose weight, first of all, we have to know what our maintenance calories are. Then we have to consume underneath that at an appropriate amount. And we need to do that on a consistent basis to have effects. So most people do not eat consistently. So they will somewhat during the week, but they'll skip meals here and there when they get busy, which is a huge effect. Okay? So you can't just skip a meal a day, randomly, and then think that that's not creating a randomness in your calorie intake. So most people don't have consistency. So one day they'll have, a chicken salad, a grilled chicken salad for lunch. Then the next day they have their body weight in queso and chips at a Mexican restaurant with friends from work. So, and then they wonder why they're overweight. And it's like, well, you just consumed 2,000 calories for lunch. Probably not a good idea. So, but that's what we're trying to do with podcast 153. And when we think of what we should be doing with our calories, that's essentially what we're aiming for, is to create consistency to our intake, so that way we have a known constant that we can modify. So if I want to lose weight, I will modify that constant to be lower, and that'll help me lose weight. If I want to build like muscle or gain weight, I'm going to take that constant of calorie intake, I'm going to increase it, so that way I know I will get more muscle mass and more overall mass to myself. So we have to know what we have coming in to know what to change and where to push it. So if one day I'm under, one day I'm over, next day I'm the same, next day I'm over, next day I'm under, next day I'm the same, we don't have a clue what we're doing consistent-wise, so we don't know where to put the calories lower, we don't know where to put the calories higher, we don't know what's going on because it's different every day. So in podcast 153, we talk about 2 general ways that people will kind of track calories. Number one is tracking macros. So, or counting calories is what they call it. So, is where you'll take like an equation of, like, say, body weight times 13, and that tells you how many calories is around roughly your maintenance level. Now, is that accurate? Hell no. It gets you in a ballpark, and then you have to start modifying from there. But not every single person on the planet is going to be the exact same. And we talk about this in podcast 153, why there's individual differences to caloric needs. So, but equations can sometimes get you in a ballpark. Then you're going to track what you eat with, like, maybe a food app or something like that on your phone or on the internet. And, oh, and that will help you then be able to know what your constant is. So if I'm putting my food into an app, it does, at the initial part of it, take some effort, because you have to type in what foods you're having and then kind of make sure you're selecting the right one from the options in the app. And then you have to put in the amount, and then the app will count that for you. Now, the first time you put the foods in, it is annoying because you have to look them up. But all apps will then eventually save your options. So the next time you have that same food, you don't have to re-look it up. You just start typing it in, or you go back to your already entered foods, and you'd select that and keep going. So it's much easier once you get the initial foods recorded. So apps get easier and easier if you take the first week or two and kind of commit to using them. So then the other option we have is to just kind of write down what you normally eat, and then try to just make that normalized. So if there's a breakfast or two, one or two breakfasts that you really like, you just stay with those. If there's one or two lunches that you really like, you just kind of stay with those. So you just start normalizing your selections or making them more consistent. So that way they're more predictable from day to day. So if you narrow down the food selections, it helps you then have more consistency in your caloric intake. So with both ways, no matter which way you pick, and you can kind of pick the pros and cons based on what you hear in podcast 153. But for both ways, we still need to then have correct protein content, which is podcast 33. You need to have correct meal timing, which is podcast 249. And you can also look at a podcast about meal frequency, like how many meals should you have per day. And that's podcast 329. Then, in podcast 249, when we talk about meal timing, we'll talk about when you should have carbs versus fats. And we kind of talk about what are the good carbs, the bad carbs, what are the good fats, bad fats. But we also have an individual podcast for those, which is 21 for carbs and podcast 29 for fats. So we have all that information available, okay? So using all that information, you would then know that you have your calories correct, protein correct, meal timing correct. And by having your meal timing correct, eating the right types of carbs or fats at the right times, it kind of takes care of the macronutrient quality for us. So if you go through all that, it gets you on track, perfect, ready to go. Now, will that take you maybe like 2 or 3 hours to listen to all the podcast? Sure. But you waste more than 2 hours probably a day on the internet looking at Facebook. So, golly, it's not that bad. So, you kind of put that information together. All those podcasts tell you exactly what to do. They tell you exactly what I do for clients. So, all of it is in there if you want to take the time to do it. So if you don't want to take the time, then you do have to pay someone like me, or you have to like buy an app that does it for you. So you can't get progress. You can't get the results you want by not putting in effort. So if whatever you're doing now hasn't gotten you the results, continuing to do what you do now won't get you the results. So if you're like, man, I wish I could get a different result from what I'm already doing. Okay, don't we all? I wish I could show up to work, do absolutely nothing different, but make twice my salary. Yeah, that'd be amazing. It's not going to happen. So we kind of have to recognize that if we want something to change, we have to change. We have to change something about what we're doing, okay? So one of the things we want to talk about, which is the whole point of today, 14 minutes into the podcast, is when you look at calories, when you're trying to count calories, oftentimes people will miss certain foods or drinks and stuff, and they won't recognize that they're having more calories than they think they are. So we're calling these hidden calories. Now, are the calories actually hidden to you in the sense that you wouldn't be aware of them? Like there's no way for you to find out about them? No, not at all. The calories are right in front of your face. Everything has nutrition labels nowadays. You can look it up on Google. So it's just we don't commonly think to look at these things, but they absolutely are shown to us. So, for example, I had a client come in one time for a nutrition consultation, and we were talking about how much soda they were drinking. And they were drinking a couple sodas a day, like the full regular sugar sodas. And I said, hey, that's not going to be your best use of calories. You got to, it's one area that you could reduce calories. So you probably don't need, 240 grams of sugar every day. Let's kind of cut that down a little bit. So, and they said, no, it's okay. I only have clear soda. And I looked at them, I was like, I know what clear soda is, meaning like Sprite and 7-Up and stuff, but I don't know why why was that worth mentioning? It's kind of like what I was thinking in my mind. And I looked at them and I said, well, those still have calories. And they said, no, clear soda doesn't have calories. So I'm kind of sitting there and I'm confused. And I'm like, do they mean diet soda? Like, what are they? So I'm kind of like looking at them and they're looking at me. And they said, like Sprite and 7-Up. And I said, yeah, I know what you're referring to. I said, but do you mean diet soda? And they said, no, just clear soda. And I was like, clear soda still has calories. They're like, no, it doesn't. So I pulled up on my phone, like the nutrition facts for Sprite, and showed it to them. That it was like, I don't even know, like 30, 40 grams of sugar in like a can of soda. And they're like, no way. And they were totally dumbfounded. And they had grown up their entire life thinking that clear soda didn't contain calories. And I thought that was hysterical. Just because of how odd that was, that just because you could see through it didn't mean there was calories in it. But also that like every single can they've touched for their entire life had the nutrition fact label on it, and on it would have said how much sugar was in it. So at no point in time in this person's life, in the 40-some years that they'd been alive, had they ever managed to look at the nutrition fact label on the can that they were drinking. I find that amazing. They never would have gotten interested. Like, how do you spend 40 years and never look at the backside of that soda can? So it's crazy to me. So that was an example where the calories weren't hidden. The person just didn't look. Okay. So we have another story where I had a lady, she was trying to lose weight, and we were again trying to control sugar intake. And I remember her telling me she was having applesauce. And I was like, well, applesauce is sugar. Like, it's just mashed up apples, so that's just sugar, sugar, sugar. And she said, no, it says there's no sugar in it. I was like, they don't make, to the best of my knowledge, they don't make sugar-free applesauce. I don't even know what that would be made of. And they're like, no, it says right on the label, no sugar. And I'm like, it can't. So I was like, can you send me a picture? So they sent me a picture, and it actually said no sugar added. That was what the label said. So I told her, I said, they didn't add sugar, but there's still sugar in it. I said, spin the bottle around and read the label. I get a text back, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, there's sugar in foods. So all they had to do, again, it wasn't hidden to them. They just had to actually freaking read the nutrition fact label. So that's what we need to do, okay? So anytime you consume something, don't assume anything, okay? So if you're going to consume, don't assume. And I didn't even write that down. I just like the fact that that rhymes. So, but you have to look and just assume that everything, well, I just told you don't assume. That's hilarious. So, maybe you do need to assume something. And I would assume that everything has calories, okay? So you have to read the nutrition fact labels for everything you consume. So just, unless you can be proven that there's no calories in it, just assume there's already calories in it. So some common ones that people will miss, and I was actually just talking to somebody recently about this, is alcohol. So alcohol has calories. So maybe the thing you're drinking itself has sugar added, like in it or part of it, like wine, for example. But there's also just calories within alcohol itself. So our body can break down alcohol to get energy from it. So just like we can use alcohol to like operate a vehicle, okay, like they have ethanol, and I don't really know all that stuff, but basically they use forms of alcohol and you can kind of propel motors and engines and stuff with it, okay, by burning it up. Well, our body can also break down alcohol to find energy. So when we consume alcohol, it has calories in itself, and then also there's calories if it has sugar and stuff added to it. So for example, in red wine, For every 5 ounces of red wine, there's 125 calories. The average glass of red wine that people consume is between 8 to 12 ounces. So we'll just say 10 ounces because it makes my math easy. So one glass of wine averages around 10 ounces, which averages around 250 calories. So if you're having 1, 2, or 3 glasses of wine, okay, every night, you're potentially having 500, 750 extra calories. So if you're doing a diet, okay, and you're trying to eat, say, let's just say 1,800 calories, and you're doing that in your food, and you're like, man, my maintenance says I should have like 2,000 calories, so I'm eating 1,800, I'm down by 200, why am I not losing weight? Well, if you're drinking 500 calories of wine every night, okay, or every other night, then you're actually not in that 200 calorie deficit, okay? So if your maintenance was 2,000 and you're eating 1,800, you would assume you're in a 200 calorie deficit. No, you're not. You're actually in a 300 calorie surplus. So alcohol has calories. I've talked about this with clients about 4 million times. So it's semi-frustrating but also surprising whenever they tell me that, like, oh my God, I didn't realize that. And I'm like, have you not listened to any of the words that have come out of my mouth? But yes, it has calories in significant amount. Okay. And especially now that they make those wine glasses that'll hold a whole damn bottle of wine. So you might as well just drink from the bottle, but that makes you feel like an alcoholic. So instead, we'll just pour the whole bottle into a glass and then drink from the glass. I don't know how that makes you feel any better. But if you're going to drink a whole bottle of wine, just drink the whole bottle of wine and not have to do any dishes. So don't even dirty the glass. But there's a significant amount of calories in red wine. Now, what if you're like the sophisticated type and you're like, I only drink white wine? Oh, okay. Well, in white wine, there's still 120 calories per 5 ounces. So that is 240 calories per glass of wine. So you might save 10 calories by drinking white wine versus red wine, but it's still a shit ton of calories. Okay? And even beer, like a 12-ounce can of beer, on average, and there's an enormous variety, like a range here, but on average, they'll average around 140 calories. And who the hell drinks one beer? So people are usually going to have 2, 3, 4, something like that. So again, they're going to get up around that, 500, 600, 700 calorie mark very quickly and easily, in the sense of not recognizing they're even doing it. So alcohol absolutely does have calories. So if you are consuming alcohol, you have to factor the calories of the alcohol in the drinks that you're having into your daily caloric amount. So if you think you're in that situation where you're at like 1,800 calories, thinking you're in a 200 calorie deficit from a 2,000 calorie maintenance level, you're not in a deficit. You're in a surplus. So you have to factor those calories from alcohol into the calories you're having. I guess like the healthiest thing would be to probably not have the alcohol or find other emotional coping mechanisms that don't have the negative effects of alcohol on them. But we'll save that for some other day. But if you're going to have alcohol, you need to be aware that it has calories in it. And so do other drinks. Like I've had people, they'll be on a weight loss diet and they'll be drinking Gatorade all day. And they said, well, it's a sports drink. I'm like, okay. First of all, you don't play sports, so I don't know how you think that was a justification. So you don't play sports, and it still has a lot of sugar in it. So in a 20-ounce bottle of Gatorade, which is the smaller bottles, there's still 140 calories of sugar. So it's sugar. It's not even like useful calories, like protein. So our body really can't do nothing with sugar. It just burns it up or saves it. So I always laughed at that when people would use the rationale that it's a sports drink as their reasoning for having it, even though they didn't play sports. So it's always funny talking to human beings. Makes me more aware of my own bullshit. So then sweet tea, oh my gosh, I think we would all, you would assume we all kind of know now that sweet tea is just basically liquid sugar. So there's probably more sugar than there is liquid in it. But for 8 ounces of it, there's 100 calories. That's a significant amount. So anything you drink, you need to just assume that it has calories, okay? And make sure you read labels. Make sure you're aware that whatever you put in your face can potentially have calories. So you need to check and see if it does. And if so, you have to factor that into your caloric allowance for the day. So another common one we have is oils. So people will have oils, like maybe even in the food that they try to prepare. So if they pour oil into like a pan to like cook some meat in, in 1 tablespoon of oil is 120 calories. That's significant. Okay, so most people, when they just pour oil into a pan to cook, they're typically going to pour around like 3-4 tablespoons or so. So they're pouring in like 500-600 calories. And even if they pick the meat up out of the oil when they're done cooking, there's still going to be some of those calories that have gotten absorbed into the meat. There's still going to be a coating of the oil over the top of the meat. So you're still getting a lot of calories in that way. And then people like Rachel Ray, who added like their body weight in olive oil to food and still called it healthy, which is absolute horse shit. They thought like they made it kind of like where people would put olive oil on things and think it was making it healthy, but they didn't recognize that olive oil has an insane amount of calories. Again, 1 tablespoon is 120 calories. So I'd see her do recipes where the food she was cooking in general was still ridiculously carb based and not a lot of protein. And then at the end she'd say like, oh, for heart health we'll add, olive oil, and then she's just pouring it on there for 30 seconds as she's talking. And I'm like, that's disgusting. All you're going to taste is a big clumpy mess of food covered in olive oil. So, but olive oil and any other oil does have calories. So you need to be aware of that. Also, certain vegetables. So beans, for example, are not like a free vegetable that we can just have anytime we want. So we kind of think of like celery, maybe as something we can chew on anytime we want. Broccoli doesn't really have a lot of calories in it, but I've had clients before where I'll tell them, hey, you can have about a cup of vegetables, with your meal to add a volume to your meal. And I'll give them a list of vegetables, which of course does not include beans on it. And if they look at their paper, beans are actually listed under carbohydrates, like foods that give you significant calories towards energy, but they'll still somehow equate beans as vegetables in terms of like the freer type lower calorie ones. So I gave a client a diet once, and oh my God, it was hilarious. So they told me that they were not losing weight, and they actually felt really full and stuffed for their foods, for their meals. And here, 3 times a day, with their meal, they were having kidney beans as their vegetable. A cup of kidney beans has 613 calories in it. And they were having a cup at 3 different meals. So they were having like 1,800 calories in kidney beans. First of all, this person was in their 20s, and I was like, who the hell in their 20s eats kidney beans? Why do I even have to tell you not to eat kidney beans? No one eats freaking kidney beans. Like grandmas and old people eat kidney beans. Why in the hell are you eating kidney beans? So he was having 1,800 calories that I was absolutely unaware of. And even on his list, if he would have followed it, it didn't have kidney beans listed. So had another diet where people ate a lot of lima beans. And lima beans are 220 calories per 1 cup of them. So to give you a comparison, people talk all the time like, I can't have corn. Like, corn has too many calories in it. 1 cup of corn only has 120 calories. A cup of lima beans is 220. A cup of kidney beans is 613. Okay? So corn is not as bad as people think it is. Even sweet potato. A cup of sweet potato only has like 120 calories. So it's amazing to me what people will believe. Like, so for example, somebody will believe that beans are a healthy vegetable, but they'll say that sweet potato and corn has too many carbs. I don't know where they hear this. I have no clue where they hear it. I'm sure they heard it. I'm not saying they made stuff up, but whoever wrote that stuff is an idiot, because that's obvious. If you just look at the numbers, that's not correct. So whoever wrote the article or told them that clearly didn't do any research. And then whenever they heard the information, they just accepted it as truth. They didn't do any research either. So kind of a bummer. So you have to be aware of vegetables. So if you think like, oh, I'm having healthy meals because I'm adding vegetables to my meals, vegetables still have calories. You need to be aware of that. So even the healthy ones like broccoli and cauliflower and asparagus and cucumbers and all those things, they all have calories as well. So that stuff needs to be accounted for. Okay. Then the last one we'll talk about in terms of hidden calories are sauces and dressings. So we all kind of, I think, are hopefully aware. I actually would have hoped that everybody was aware of everything I've already said already. But salad dressings are really high in calories. And especially when you just pour them over top of food to the point where it looks like you're eating a mound of ranch, not that you can't tell anything that's underneath it. Okay, so even like a typical portion size of ranch dressing has over 200 calories. Even barbecue sauce is a typical portion of barbecue sauce has over 200 calories. Marinara sauce in like spaghetti. So sometimes you'll hear people say that, like they'll be like, "Oh, I can't have spaghetti. I can't have that red sauce. It has calories in it." So instead of having spaghetti with red sauce, I'm gonna have this salad and pour my body weight of ranch dressing on it. That's ridiculous. There's more calories in the damn salad than there was in that spaghetti plate. Okay, so marinara sauce, a typical portion of that, only has 100 calories. And then Alfredo sauce, which is like the fatty white sauce in Italian dishes, that has over 200 calories in a typical portion. So sauces, you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm just having, maybe you look at the amount of spaghetti you're having and you factor that in. Maybe you add some meatballs, so you factor in like the weight of the meat, like the ounces of the meat. But then you pour the sauce on it and you don't pay attention to the calories in the sauce. So you have to be aware that everything you eat has calories. Okay? So you have to have the assumption, if you're going to assume, that everything has calories, rather than assuming that certain things don't. Just assume every single thing has calories, unless you can prove otherwise. Okay? So read labels and think that every single thing that goes into your face, every single thing has to be accounted for. Okay? Now, if you don't have nutrition fact label on the item itself, you can just Google it. Just type the